All right, so picture this, you're all settled in for Super Bowl.
Oh,
LAX Chiefs Eagles about to kick off. The energy is electric, but there's a twist to this Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, a big one.
President Trump.
President Trump is going to be the first sitting president to actually attend the Super Bowl.
Wow.
And he's using this very public, very American platform to give a pretty revealing interview with Fox News,
oh, really?
dropping some major hints about the direction of his administration, specifically the role of Elon Musk in it.
Okay, so we all know Musk has a lot on his plate running, well, pretty much everything.
Right.
But in this interview, it comes out that he's also deeply involved in the government,
Ugh.
working with his brand new Department of Government Efficiency.
Right, and this isn't Musk's first time, getting involved with the government.
Right.
He's had contracts with NASA, SpaceX, works with the Air Force,
Sure.
but this is a different level.
It is.
It's like he's running a whole department, and Trump himself even said that Musk isn't gaining anything financially from it.
Hmm.
So then you got to wonder, what is his motivation here?
Yeah, what is it?
Is this purely public service?
Yeah, is he really just that altruistic?
Or is there something else going on?
Well, to make things even more interesting, Trump uses this interview to specifically call out USA as a target for Musk's efficiency efforts.
Yeah, this is where it gets really juicy.
We're talking blocked access to their systems.
Right.
Musk posting, "We're shutting it down" on X.
I saw that.
Top people resigning, even the agency's sign being taken down from headquarters in D.C.
It's a bold move.
It is so bold.
This move against USA directly connects to Trump's accusations of fraud within the agency. He's been saying for years that they're misusing millions of dollars, even calling it a slush fund.
Right.
Clearly, he sees dismantling USA as a way to fix what he sees as a broken system.
Okay, but hold on.
Yeah.
There's been pushback on this, hasn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
Didn't a federal judge block that mass administrative leave that Trump wanted for USAID employees?
Yeah.
And what about the Congressional Research Office saying Trump doesn't even have the authority to just dissolve the agency?
You're hitting all the right points. There's been major legal pushback.
Wow.
And it raises the question of, is Trump exceeding his executive power?
Is he going too far?
Is he overstepping? And if so, is USA just the beginning?
Well, that's where the interview takes a really wild turn.
Oh, yeah.
Trump says he's going to send Musk to the Department of Education next. And then get this, the military.
He was very clear about it.
Yeah.
He actually said, quote, "Then I'm going to tell him very soon, like maybe in 24 hours, to go check the Department of Education," Mr. Trump said. He's going to find the same thing. "Then I'm going to go to the military. Let's check the military. We're going to find billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse. But I campaigned on this."
So it sounds like he's got a much bigger plan here.
Oh, yeah. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Like he's using Musk as this, I don't know, efficiency czar
Yeah.
to target any agency he sees as bloated or wasteful.
It's a pretty powerful tool to have at your disposal.
Yeah, and, Trump also talked about how his second term is different.
Mm-hmm.
He had more opposition in his first term and regrets some of the people he chose for his administration back then.
Right. So you have to wonder, is he now seeking out people who are more, let's say, on board with his agenda?
Yeah, that's a good point. So we've gone from Super Bowl excitement to a potential government overhaul.
All thanks to one interview.
All in one interview.
And remember, this Super Bowl is in New Orleans,
Oh, right.
a city that just experienced a horrific car ramming attack.
Yeah.
Trump's meeting with victims' families adds another layer to this whole thing.
Yeah, that's true. A lot going on here.
A lot to unpack.
So help me out here. If we take a step back, what does Musk's involvement in all of this tell us about the evolving relationship between tech power and the government?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Is this a new model for leadership in government?
Are we going to see more tech billionaires stepping into these roles?
Mm-hmm. And if so, what will that mean for the future of how our government operates?
Whoa, hold on. That's a lot to think about.
It is.
Before we get too far into the future,
Yeah.
let's go back to USAID for a minute.
Okay.
What exactly is USAA,
Good question.
and what would shutting it down actually entail?
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines.
Yeah.
For those who maybe aren't as familiar with it,
Yeah.
USAID stands for the United States Agency for International Development.
Okay.
It's a massive organization, billions of dollars in its budget, and it's tasked with providing aid to developing countries all around the world.
It's a lot of responsibility.
We're talking everything from disaster relief and humanitarian assistance to those long-term development projects focused on healthcare education, economic growth, The whole spectrum.
Okay, so it's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
But I have to ask, what's the actual process like for shutting down an agency like that?
Right.
Is it just like flipping a switch, or is it way more complicated?
Oh, it's definitely not as simple as flipping a switch. I mean, remember those blocked USAID systems you talked about? That's really just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Imagine trying to untangle this global network of programs, partnerships, funding streams,
Right.
legal obligations, contracts with vendors, and then not to mention the thousands of employees,
Wow.
both here in the U.S. and around the world.
Yeah.
It's a logistical nightmare.
It sounds like it.
And the potential for disruption is huge.
So let's talk about those potential consequences then.
Okay.
What happens to the people and projects that rely on USAID support if it suddenly disappears?
That's a really important point. It's not just about cutting bureaucracy or, saving money.
Right.
We're talking about real-world impacts on vulnerable populations.
Right.
Think about a community in a developing country that depends on USAID for clean water or medical supplies, or a program that's working to prevent the spread of disease.
Yeah.
Cutting these efforts off could have devastating consequences.
Yeah, that's a good point. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
if Trump's so focused on eliminating fraud and waste,
Uh-huh.
wouldn't that mean those resources could be redirected to more effective programs?
That's the argument you hear a lot.
Right.
The idea that we can just do more with less,
Right.
but the reality is much more complicated.
How so?
First, you gotta actually prove that widespread fraud exists,
Right.
which is a whole other debate.
Uh-huh.
Then, even if you do find some savings,
Yeah.
redirecting those funds isn't always a smooth process.
Okay.
There are different regulations, different approval processes, different priorities in play. It's not just a simple matter of shifting money around.
So even if we set aside the humanitarian concerns for a second,
Right.
there are still practical challenges to actually dismantling an agency as big and complex as USAID.
Absolutely. And those challenges only get bigger when you consider Trump's comments about sending Musk to the Department of Education and then the military. These are massive organizations with their own complexities and challenges. The idea that you can just kind of parachute in and overhaul them overnight with this focus on finding fraud seems incredibly naive and honestly risky.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a moment.
Okay.
What if there really is widespread waste and inefficiency in these agencies? What if Musk's approach actually could lead to a more effective and accountable government?
It's certainly possible that there are things that could be improved, but the question is this the right approach?
Yeah.
Is focusing solely on eliminating fraud without really understanding the complexities and the nuances of these organizations? Is that really the best way to achieve efficiency and accountability?
It's interesting that you bring up this idea of nuance.
Yeah.
It feels like this whole situation with Musk and the government, it's happening against this backdrop of all these bigger societal debates we're having about the role of technology in our lives.
Right.
I mean, on the one hand, we have this amazing potential for innovation and progress. But then on the other hand, there's this growing concern about automation job displacement and the concentration of power in the hands of a few tech giants.
You're absolutely right. This is about more than just government efficiency.
It is.
It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about power, expertise, and even decision-making.
Yeah.
Are we moving towards a world where complex societal problems are going to be solved by algorithms and tech CEOs? And if so, what does that mean for democracy and accountability?
Whoa. It almost feels like we're at a crossroads.
I think you're right. We're in uncharted territory.
Yeah.
And the choices that we make now are going to have these far-reaching consequences.
Okay, so how does the Super Bowl tie into all of this?
Right.
I mean, we started this whole conversation talking about Trump attending the game in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about the Super Bowl amidst all this talk about government shakeups, but I think the location and the timing are significant.
Okay.
Remember, New Orleans is still recovering from that car ramming attack. And by attending the Super Bowl there, Trump is able to project this image of strength and resilience.
It's like he's saying we're not going to let terrorism define us. We're going to move forward stronger than ever.
Exactly. And by doing that,
Yeah.
he's tapping into that deep-seated American desire for normalcy, for a return to a time when things felt safer and more predictable.
Right. And what about the fact that he's meeting with the victims' families?
That's another calculated move. It lets him position himself as a compassionate leader.
Okay.
Someone who cares about the people who were affected by this tragedy. It's a way to kind of humanize his image and demonstrate empathy.
But some might say it's an opportunity to exploit a tragedy for political gain.
There's always that risk. It's a delicate balancing act.
It is.
And ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide whether they believe his actions are genuine or calculated.
So we've got this backdrop of a nation still grappling with the aftermath of a terrorist attack.
Right.
A president who's trying to project an image of strength and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And then this bombshell interview where he announces these plans to potentially dismantle these major government agencies.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's almost too much to take in.
It is a lot to process.
Yeah.
And I think it highlights just how important critical thinking is.
Uh-huh.
Questioning the narratives that we're being presented with.
Right.
And really digging deeper to understand the complexities underneath the surface.
You know, as much as I'm fascinated by all this political intrigue,
yeah,
I keep wondering what it means for those of us who are just, trying to live our lives,
right.
Go to work, raise our families.
Mm-hmm.
What are the actual practical implications of these potential government shakeups?
That's a great question. And it's one I think we need to be asking ourselves more and more as we navigate this rapidly changing world.
Yeah.
The decisions made in Washington, the actions of these tech leaders, the choices we make as individuals,
Right.
They all have these ripple effects.
So let's zoom out for a minute then.
Okay.
We've talked about USA, Department of Education, the military. But what about the bigger picture?
Yeah.
What does Musk's involvement in all of this say about the changing relationship between government and the tech industry?
That's where things get really interesting. We're seeing this blurring of the lines between the public and private sectors,
Okay.
with these tech companies playing a more and more influential role in shaping government policy and even delivering public services.
Think about companies like DOGE.
Exactly.
They're already involved in everything from internet access to developing AI for the military.
Right. And as these companies grow in size and power, their influence on government is only going to increase.
So the question is, how do we make sure that this influence is being used responsibly and ethically?
Right. How do we balance this need for innovation and efficiency with the importance of democratic values and accountability?
And what about the economic implications?
Yeah.
I mean, we're already seeing a lot of anxiety about automation and the potential for jobs to disappear. Could these government shakeups lead to even more uncertainty and instability in the job market?
It's a legitimate concern. As technology keeps advancing,
Yeah.
we need to think about how we adapt our education systems and workforce training programs to prepare people for the jobs of the future.
Right.
We also need to consider the potential social and economic consequences of all this automation and think about policies that can mitigate those consequences.
Because it's not just about these specific agencies that are being targeted.
Right.
It's about the bigger picture, the long-term implications of this whole convergence of technology, government, and the economy.
Exactly. It's a complex web of interconnected issues.
It is.
And it's crucial for us to engage in these conversations, to think critically about the choices we're making, and to demand transparency and accountability from our leaders.
I'm starting to realize that this deep dive goes way beyond just one Super Bowl weekend and one controversial interview.
Yeah.
We're talking about fundamental questions about the future of our country.
Absolutely.
The role of technology in our lives. The very nature of power and governance.
You said it. This is about the big picture stuff.
It is. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
There's always more to explore.
What about DOGE specifically?
Oh, yeah.
They seem to be a key player in all of this.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right. We can't just ignore DOGE in all of this.
No, they're a huge part of this.
They have their fingers in so many pies, from social media to space travel to those Neuralink implants that everyone's talking about.
Right.
Now they're deep in these government contracts. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And it's interesting, even a little unsettling when you think about the implications of a single company having so much influence over both the technology we use and the policies that shape our lives.
It's a lot of power concentrated in one place.
Yeah, it really is.
And you mentioned earlier that DOGE is heavily involved in government contracts. What kind of contracts are we talking about?
We're talking everything from providing cloud computing services for federal agencies to developing AI-powered surveillance systems for law enforcement. And let's not forget about their role in the space race, those big contracts with NASA and the Space Force.
So they're basically making money from the government at the same time that they're influencing policy.
Yeah.
That seems like a conflict of interest.
It's a definite gray area.
Yeah.
And it raises questions about whose interests are really being served.
Right.
Are these government contracts being awarded based on merit, the best interests of the public? Or is there an element of favoritism at play?
Yeah, because of Musk's close relationship with Trump.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if Musk's position in the Department of Government Efficiency gives DOGE an unfair advantage when it comes to winning those contracts.
It's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But the potential for abuse is there.
It is.
And that's why things like transparency and oversight are so important. We need to know how these decisions are being made, who's benefiting, and whether the public interest is actually being protected.
And what about this whole fraud issue?
Right.
Trump seems so convinced that there's just rampant waste and abuse happening throughout the government. Is there any evidence to support that?
Well, it's important to note that accusations of fraud and waste in government are nothing new.
They're not.
This has been going on for a long time.
Right.
It's a recurring theme throughout history,
Ah.
often used by politicians to justify cuts to programs they don't support or to consolidate their own power.
So you're saying we should be skeptical?
We should be critical and demand evidence.
Okay.
It's easy to throw accusations around,
Right.
but it's a lot harder to actually prove them.
Right. And even if there are some instances of fraud, they're likely isolated cases rather than some systemic problem.
Right, exactly.
Okay. But let's say for the sake of argument that there is some level of waste and inefficiency in the government.
Okay.
Is Musk really the right person to fix it?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, he's obviously a brilliant innovator, but his track record is also full of impulsiveness.
Yeah.
A disregard for regulations, and a tendency to overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah, like those self-driving cars that were supposed to be everywhere by now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So while he may have some good ideas, there's a risk that his approach could be too disruptive.
Right.
Too focused on short-term gains and not really aligned with the values and priorities of public service.
This is a lot to take in.
It is.
We've got Trump, Musk, DOGE, government agencies being targeted, and all of this is happening with the Super Bowl as the backdrop in a city still recovering from a terrorist attack.
It's a lot. It's like something out of a movie.
It does feel that way.
But this is the reality we're living in.
It is.
And I think it's a reminder that we can't just sit back and be passive observers.
Right.
Like, we have to stay informed,
Yeah.
stay engaged, and be willing to speak up for the kind of future we want to see.
I completely agree. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the big takeaway here is the convergence of technology, wealth, and political power is changing our world in these really profound ways. And it's up to all of us to make sure those changes benefit everyone, not just a select few.
That's a really powerful message, and I think a call to action for all of us.
It is.
As we go about our lives, as we use technology, as we participate in our democracy,
Yeah.
let's remember that we have a role to play in shaping the future.
Absolutely. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's our deep dive for today.
That's it.
Thanks for joining us.